300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field. The last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Wednesday. This is one of the most filled sports topic-related weeks that I've seen in quite some time. I'm not going to really touch on it too much, but the New England Patriots released Stephon Gilmore literally an hour ago, the 4-time Pro Bowler. That's kind of crazy news that all of a sudden blew up. But we have to start in the NFL with some even bigger news in Jacksonville with the Jaguars. Urban Meyer situation just continues to kind of boil over. And this continues to kind of rotten and decay right now. In fact, they've reached what's quote-unquote a crisis mode. So obviously we know that a video leaked and surfaced last week after the Jacksonville Jaguars lost to the Cincinnati Bengals on a Thursday night football game, 24-21. Urban Meyer was filmed at his own restaurant in Cincinnati, or in Columbus, Ohio, rather. And the video shows that he was with some people. There was a young woman that appeared to be either giving him some kind of lap dance or in his lap, and his hands obviously touching her bottom of this woman. So we know what the image shows. We know what the video says. And so Jacksonville Jaguars owner Shad Khan came out and basically reprimanded him publicly, saying that Urban needs to regain the trust of the team, and that his actions and his conduct are inexcusable. And mind you, this is all within the first 4 weeks of his first stint in the NFL. This guy hasn't even reached Thanksgiving, and there's already controversy. There's already a huge conundrum right now for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And his slogan that he had been frequently using both in college and now at the NFL is "Own It," to try and rebuild this franchise that's been moribund and been one of the worst franchises in the NFL. His slogan is "Own It." Now, certainly that slogan appears to be aging quite well when we look at it now. And let me first start from the personal side of things. This is a terrible look. And I don't even need to delve into the relationship between he and between him and his wife and his family and his kids. I'm not going to get too much into that. The only thing I'll say about that is my mom's a therapist, and she sees struggling couples and divorced couples all the time. And this is a relationship that will certainly need some counseling and need to undergo some therapy to fix their marriage and fix the whole dynamics between the kids and the relationship between he and his wife. So that's a given. That goes without saying. And I don't need to really delve more into that. But this is just an atrocious look from a guy who's supposed to be the CEO of the franchise, the CEO and the corporate leader, the authority figure, the guy with the most responsibility to hold everyone accountable within this Jacksonville Jaguars franchise and the team. And there's no question that when we look at Urban Meyer, I'll first say this. We know he's always had a bit of a checkered past. In fact, you look at his previous stints, it's always been marred by some scandal kind of hanging over every organization he's been with. Florida in 2009, his assistant coach, who was also the wide receivers coach, Zach Smith, had apparently abused and sexually assaulted his then girlfriend, now wife, in Gainesville. And that controversy carried with him to Ohio State, where once again that same assistant coach, Zach Smith, had allegedly or he was involved in other sexual assault allegations, I think with the same woman. And then obviously once he reached, and that was at Ohio State, then once he was hired by the Jacksonville Jaguars, he hired Chris Doyle, the former Iowa strength and conditioning coach, who had uttered racial slurs and racial remarks towards his players that got him to resign immediately. And immediately the day following his acceptance as a new kind of coach, strength and conditioning coach for the Jaguars, he was forced to resign because of the backlash. Understandable. So all of this has already been part of Urban Meyer's past. So we've known that he's made some really bad judgment calls during his previous stints. But that was to be expected because that was who Urban Meyer had been up until this point. And he's taken this mantra of it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. I've said this before. Winning can cure a lot of things. When you're winning, when you're successful in life, that can mask so many other deficiencies, so many other potholes that may exist within your own personal life, within your relationship with other people, because success is ultimately the most important thing for a lot of people. You look at Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, even Robert Kraft has openly admitted in this recent kind of book that just came out by Seth Wickersham that Bill Belichick is a piece of work. Well, the only reason why he can get away with it and players are willing to accept kind of his barbaric and a bit antiquated coaching methods and more traditional coaching methods are because he has proven that this can work. There is efficacy. There's proof of the efficacy in his methods. Coach Greg Popovich in the NBA, he could coach players extremely hard because Tim Duncan was willing to take it. And it resulted in a lot of winning. So when you have the proof that a concept, that a method, that a style of teaching works, then you can get away with a lot of stuff. And for the majority of Urban Meyer's career, throughout his collegiate career, he's constantly been a winner. 17-6 in 2 years at Bowling Green, 22-2 in 2 seasons at Utah. This is a guy who won 2 national championships at Florida, a national championship at Ohio State where he won 90% of his games, 83 and I believe 9 was his record. So 83-9 in 7 years. The problem we're having here is he's not winning. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-4 this year. They've lost 19 consecutive games dating back to last season. So who is going to gloss over and show leniency to a quarterback, not to a quarterback, to a head coach that isn't going to practice what he preaches? He's preaching all these values. He's preaching these important values. And yet he's not willing to do it himself. So of course he's going to lose the locker room. And of course the players, and it was reported that one of the players said he's got zero credibility within the locker room. Of course, that makes perfect sense. That's not surprising to me at all. In fact, for me, because, and not to mention he probably had little faith, the players probably had little faith in him to begin with. by the mere fact that he'd never coached in the NFL before. But what stands out to me is I always kind of thought about this. This was always a lingering thought of mine, is I never really knew how much Urban Meyer really wanted this Jacksonville Jaguars job. Because to me, he always has appeared a bit apathetic, a bit disinterested from the jump, despite the fact that he was inheriting draft rights to a generational quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. But let's really think about how Urban Meyer got here. This was a guy that had been ridden out of Ohio State because of health concerns and a potential scandalous development that could have been exposed. But his health concerns, he wanted to retire. This is a guy who was an analyst at Fox for 2 years. He had zero intentions of coming out of retirement to coach. He was perfectly content just being an analyst, or at least just not coaching, with the anxiety, with the stress that it entails, and eventually kind of had to be wooed and forced out of retirement because of an offer that was too lucrative to pass up. And that's really what it was. There was an offer that was too lucrative for him to pass up. And so sometimes some opportunities are too lucrative to pass up on. So I always question in the back of my mind what his true motivation was, whether he really wanted this job. Because in the NFL and in any head coaching job, in any profession, you got to be all in. If you're not all in, you're not going to have success. And it's simple as that. The players can read through it. Clearly, he's lost that credibility. And I'll say this. The actual incident itself, when you isolate the incident itself, I don't necessarily think that the isolated incident itself is necessarily a fireable offense. And I'm not saying that it is. But if the players all of a sudden don't respond to the coach, if his messages aren't getting through, if they no longer trust him or believe in him and he's lost the locker room, well, then change has to come. Because at the end of the day, you might be the most qualified coach. You might have the credentials. But if the players don't like you, if they don't believe in you, if they don't buy into what you're saying, then what are you there for? That's really the reality. And unfortunately, this video perhaps may perfectly embody what his time was going to be there. Maybe it encapsulates what the time was that he spent with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, not a good look at all. Again, I think that Urban Meyer is a brilliant head coach. I think he has a brilliant football mind. But that doesn't negate the fact that it was just a dumb decision. And at least he acknowledged it to some degree. I'm not advocating for him to lose his job over this necessarily, but if the players think it's time for him to go, then it's time for him to go. And transitioning to another controversy, Kyrie Irving's situation is fascinating with the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets actually just came out and acknowledged yesterday that they're unsure about Kyrie Irving's vaccination status. And apparently they're prepared to play home games and to practice in Brooklyn without him. Now, obviously, we saw Steve Nash, and it was reported that Steve Nash had come out and said, we're not moving practices to accommodate Kyrie Irving. And the Nets, their optimism has been waning, and I think they're a little bit unsure if they can accept a part-time Kyrie Irving professional player. Now, the Nets had just completed a West Coast trip. They played the Lakers in the preseason a couple days ago, so they were practicing in San Diego for the week. Kyrie Irving was obviously a part of those practices, and according to the structure of his finances, if he were to skip games, he'd be losing out on about $381,000 per game, including the preseason. If that was to persist throughout the entire regular season, he would lose about $15.6 million over the course of the year. And it's funny because in life, you're always going to find, and I feel like in life, you always see those people, those people that always claim that they don't want attention and yet always seem to be a distraction or drawing attention to themselves or raising topics that seem to have been unprompted or somehow magically appeared out of thin air. It would be one of those situations where you're living with a roommate or you're living with a significant other and they come home all miffed. You can see the irritation on their face. They're kind of scalding as they're entering the apartment or the house. And they come up to you complaining and they're saying, man, my boss is a piece of work and they didn't let me have a good lunch break, but I don't really want to talk about it. Well, the comment was tacitly posed because the way you're supposed to interpret it, if you're the roommate, is, hey, they want to talk about this. They want to talk about this. Or if someone begins a statement by saying, I don't want to be disrespectful, but, well, you can negate anything that's going to come because what's about to come out of that person's mouth following that precursor is some kind of insult, some kind of slight. When you're driving on the sidewalk and or driving on the sidewalk, hopefully you don't drive on the sidewalk. If you're driving on the street and you approach a stoplight and you see an inflatable tube man, right? Those kind of inflatable tube men that are right on the sidewalk, a huge distraction, and there's a sign next to it saying, please be careful driving, drive carefully, like don't text and drive. Well, that's hypocritical because the purpose of the inflatable tube man is to distract you, is to draw your eyes off the road. Kyrie Irving comes out and says a week ago, guys, I don't want to be a distraction. This is personal for me. Please let this not be a distraction. Well, the mere fact that you're mentioning, I don't want this to be a distraction, is inherently a distraction. Works the same way. And had he simply just said, this is personal, I'm not going to address this further, okay, the media would still have questions. There would still be opaqueness and ambiguity surrounding his situation, and people would still want to know what he's planning on doing. They'd still be seeking some kind of resolution or some answers, but at the very least, no one would be concerned about his words. They'd be more concerned about his actions. But now Kyrie Irving's words and his actions are a distraction. And that's a big problem. And this is a Brooklyn Nets team that has aspirations to win an NBA title. In fact, they were just recently voted as the team most by NBA GMs in the league, the team most likely to win the NBA title. Well, a lot of that's going to hinge on whether or not he plays. In fact, those aspirations will be significantly hampered if he's not around for half the games. And to be honest, if I'm Kevin Durant or I'm James Harden, I'm not addressing this publicly. I'm not going to bring this up with the media. There's no need to get the media involved. But privately, I'm approaching Kyrie Irving either individually or together, which maybe they already have. And I'm saying to him, listen, man, we appreciate your principles. We appreciate your position. We're always going to be brothers. We care about you, but the hell with this, man. You're either with us. Are you with us? And if you are, then get vaccinated. If you're not with us, then get going. To me, it's as simple as that, because those two guys, they don't have time to be having to dilly-dally and deal with a situation that's out of their control. That's simply out of their control. And I hate to kind of use this terminology, but I do think to some degree it's a little bit selfish and inconsiderate by Kyrie Irving, a little bit self-serving, because he's not really thinking about what's in the best interest of the team. He's just kind of posing a bigger detriment to their efforts. And it's not to suggest that he shouldn't be concerned about COVID or have the feelings, or the vaccine rather, or have the feelings that he has. But at the end of the day, you've got brothers that want to play basketball, that have aspirations to win a championship. And in a lot of ways, they're counting on your presence. So I love him as a player. I think he's a really well-spoken individual. He's clearly an intelligent. He's a bright young man. And again, a showstopper. He's a box office type of player. You walk through the turnstiles to see Kyrie Irving. He's one of the best attractions in the game. But it's getting harder and harder for me and other fans and media members to like this guy. And I really do like Kyrie Irving, but given his mercurial nature and the maverick approach he's been taking to a lot of different positions, a lot of stances, taking these sabbaticals, not providing any reasons for his absences, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to really resonate and to really appreciate this guy. And I guess, fortunately, this is why you traded for James Harden, to have that contingency plan, to have that insurance in the event that Kyrie Irving kind of went haywire and you weren't sure what he was going to be doing. And I still think that, while I don't think the Nets would necessarily be the favorites to win if it was just KD and James Harden, but they could certainly still contend and compete for an NBA championship with those two guys. So right now, I think if you're the Nets, you have to be feeling kind of tepid and kind of having lukewarm feelings about this Nets team, because again, I think that their championship doesn't fully hinge on Kyrie, but them being dubbed the favorites certainly hinges on whether he's there. Right now he's not, and I'm not sure if he's going to. I really don't know if he's going to show up. There's rumors that he might threaten to retire if he's traded. That might be the best course of action for the Nets. They may have to resort to that if it continues to persist for a long period of time. And speaking of those GM results, so every year before the start of the season, the NBA GMs are polled. They answer a bunch of questions. It's a huge survey about which teams they think are going to win the NBA title, or which player is going to win the MVP, or which player is the best defensive player. And they go through positions. There are a bunch of different categories. And so a couple days ago, they came out with the survey results about which teams are favored to pick that they would pick to win the NBA title and win the league MVP. So, and obviously the GMs can't vote for their own team. They have to vote for other teams. So the Brooklyn Nets were overwhelmingly selected as the favorites to win the NBA title. In fact, they had received 72% of the votes. The Lakers came in second at 17%. The Bucks came in third at 10%. Now, first of all, I don't really have a problem with any of these polls, and I kind of concur. I think that the Brooklyn Nets, with their complete cast of characters, should be the favorites, given that they've had experience playing with one another. It's the same core group of guys. Now, again, I just touched on Kyrie Irving's situation, and I think a lot of this hinges on whether or not he's there. But assuming that he is there for the entire season, then I think that it makes sense. I got no problems with the Brooklyn Nets being the favorites to win the NBA title. This is the interesting one. The guy who is predicted to win the league MVP is Kevin Durant. So Kevin Durant, now, and it's not by a landslide, but Kevin Durant received the most votes to win MVP, about 37% of the votes. Luka Doncic finished second with 33%. Giannis was third with 13%. Joel Embiid and James Harden tied for fourth with 7%. And Steph Curry at finished sixth with 3% of the votes. So basically what the GMs are telling you and telling us is that the guy that they think is going to win the league MVP is the player on the team with the best record. Now, it's not to say that when you isolate Kevin Durant, he's not an MVP caliber player, because he is. There's no question. He's probably the best player in the NBA right now. Is likely the guy who I would vote for. But with that being said, that doesn't mean that he's necessarily the most attractive guy to pick to win league MVP. In fact, when you look at the history of the league, rarely do you see the guys that are featured on kind of super teams winning the MVP. The only example of that in recent memory was LeBron James of the Miami Heat in 2012 and 2013. But the main reason was because there weren't any other competing super teams to really contend with. I mean, you look at the Warriors when they had Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, neither of them won a league MVP during the 3 years that he was there. In 2008, when the Celtics formed their big three with Garnett and Pierce and Ray Allen, none of them won league MVP. So I just caution whether, and I'm concerned that the presence of both he and James Harden will likely offset one another. And that's why, to me, I actually think the guy that should be garnering more consideration for league MVP right now is Steph Curry, given he finished second in the voting last year, and he was an 8th seed. We look at Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook had a fantastic season 2016 when he won the league MVP. In fact, he had recorded the first triple-double for an entire season since Oscar Robertson did it in the 60s. So, but even the Thunder that year were the 6th seed. So the little bit higher. Steph, they were the 8th seed. And so he didn't have enough winning last year to complement the kind of historic offensive run that he was on. But I think that this year, the Warriors with Clay, again, with an entire season of Wiggins, Wiseman, this core group of guys, I think that he's going to continue to have a fantastic season. But the more important thing is it will translate to more wins this year. And I think that last year, had Steph and the Warriors been a 3 or 4 seed, he probably wins the league MVP. But instead, it was Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. So, again, I don't have huge gripes with any of these polls right now, but I will say that I don't know if Kevin Durant should necessarily be favored, only because they've got the presence of James Harden, and more so if Kyrie Irving is there as well. It's going to make it so much more difficult for him, I think, to garner all that attention, all that consideration. Okay. So, transitioning to a heartwarming story in the NBA. Pau Gasol, the NBA veteran, played in the league for 19 years, officially retired from basketball yesterday, started his career at FC Barcelona, was drafted 2001 by the Memphis Grizzlies, number 3 overall, has had an unbelievable, illustrious career, 2-time NBA champion, 6-time All-Star, 19 seasons, was the 2002 Rookie of the Year. He won the 2006 World Championship at the FIBA Cup. He's a 3-time Olympic medalist. His accolades speak for himself. And Pau Gasol is going to be headed to the Hall of Fame. There's no question about that. For his career, averaged 17 points, like 9 rebounds, 3 assists over 19 seasons. In fact, the Lakers, those numbers ticked up a bit. 18 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists, a block and a half a game, 52% from the floor over his career with the Lakers. And in the postseason, those numbers were pretty much identical. Slight dip, just 17 points as opposed to 18 points. But when you think about Pau Gasol, and I think for this younger generation, and though a lot of people would consider me a part of the younger generation, in many respects I am, but there's even younger generations of basketball fans that I don't think truly appreciate or understand what Pau Gasol meant to not only the Lakers, but the entire NBA. Because Pau Gasol was one of the most skilled big men the game has ever seen. In fact, I would argue that he was perhaps the best passing big man in NBA history. You can make that argument for Pau Gasol. And when I think about the Lakers, let's first start with his Lakers career. The impact and the magnitude of his arrival in LA is catastrophic, but in a not catastrophic in a bad way. It's like earth-shattering in a great way, in a positive way, because Kobe Bryant, he's my favorite athlete of all time. Kobe is my favorite athlete of all time. The Lakers are not winning and likely don't return back to the finals, let alone win those championships in 2009, 2010, if not for Pau Gasol. As great as Kobe is, and as great as Kobe was, they would not have won those championships without Pau Gasol. His presence was huge. In fact, Kobe threatened to leave the Lakers and was nearly going to sign with the Clippers if the Lakers didn't find a way to trade for an all-star. And then they pulled off one of the biggest heists in NBA history mid-season in 2008. Lakers somehow able to acquire Gasol from the Memphis Grizzlies, surrounding a package including Kwame Brown. I had to even look this up. I didn't even remember. Javaris Crittenton and Aaron Mickey, along with draft rights to his younger brother and Marc Gasol. Really, it was Kwame Brown and some ancillary pieces and picks for Pau Gasol, which the fact that they were able to pull that off speaks volumes to Jerry West and his basketball genius. And there's so many memorable moments, but for me, my still the moment for Pau Gasol that's left an indelible mark in my mind is in 2010, first round against OKC. This was a young Oklahoma City Thunder featuring Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Serge Ibaka, Nick Collison. You had young Oklahoma City Thunder stars that were just kind of on the rise. And you had Kobe, the defending champs. It's game 6 on the road in OKC. It's their first time hosting a playoff game ever, or a playoff series, rather. It's electric at Chesapeake Energy Arena. And the Lakers are down 1 with a couple seconds left. Kobe drives it baseline down the right side, pulls up for a jumper, misses it, and Gasol's there to put it back up and in with 0.5 seconds left to clinch game 6 and the first round for the Lakers. And it was only fitting that it was off of Kobe's miss, because that's the kind of connection and the relationship that they have. I think that when I read Kobe's book, and whenever you hear him talk so glowingly about Pau Gasol, it's like Pau Gasol might have been the closest teammate he ever had. He and Shaq were best buds off the court later in their careers. But they loved each other, but at the same time, there was so much friction between he and Shaq. There wasn't any friction between Gasol and Kobe. They were on the same wavelength from day one. They reached 3 NBA finals together, 2008, 2009, 2010. And what he's meant for the Lakers, I appreciate the fact that the Lakers are retiring his jersey as well. It is well earned for a guy that's helped bring 2 championships to this franchise. And this is a guy who finished his career ranked in the top 50 in NBA and ABA history in total points, rebounds, and blocks. And when you look at his skill set, again, as I said, he's one of the most skilled big men to have ever played the game. He could post you up on either side of the block, can finish with either hand, had touch, had finesse. He was a legitimate 7-footer who had great length, who could deflect, who could defend the rim, who blocked shots, altered shots all the time, big presence. He had a lethal elbow jumper that he could just spot up and hit. He had dribbling skills. He could bring the ball up the floor like a guard. He could stretch the floor, hit the 3, but perhaps the most impressive skill that he possessed at that height was his passing ability. His vision was incredible. His ability to facilitate teammates having eyes in the back of his head. He was a wizard with the ball at 7 feet. And he was literally like a triple threat every time he played in the game. So his value kind of rung so much more true than what his stats may have suggested, which the stats back then in the era that he was playing in, those were really, really good stats. So Pau Gasol was a fantastic player. I mean, again, his Statue of Liberty dunks were special. He was just a very special player. And again, I would argue there's a strong argument to be made that he is the best passing big man in NBA history. And then you look at his impact on a global scale. Again, this is an international player. Started his career in Barcelona. Only fitting that he finished his career with the club FC Barcelona, finished his career over in Spain. But when you think about the international basketball players, there is a strong argument to be made that Pau Gasol is at least a top 10 international player, if not maybe a top 5. I have to go through all the international guys, but just thinking off the top of my head, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, Giannis, Luka Doncic, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Arvydas Sabonis, and Pau Gasol. That's about 8 guys right there that are international basketball players. That there's an interesting argument. I don't know if people would place Pau Gasol ahead of Dirk Nowitzki. Probably not. Probably not ahead of Giannis. Likely not ahead of Luka Doncic. Over Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker? Possibly. I think a strong argument could be made he was better than those 2 guys. Better than Sabonis. So internationally, he's a top 5, I think, international basketball player of all time. So tremendous career. In fact, even Russell Westbrook just came out and shared a fun fact yesterday saying that Pau Gasol is actually his favorite player growing up. Now, again, how much truth and validity is there? I don't know. I mean, he acknowledged that he didn't model his game, obviously, after Pau Gasol. Kobe was his favorite player in that regard. But as far as guys that he just appreciated watching play the game of basketball, playing the right way, Pau Gasol was such an unselfish teammate, played the right way, had a great positive vibe to him, great teammate, great locker room guy, and he had a tremendous career. I'm sure he would have loved Kobe to induct him, to introduce him into the Hall of Fame, because Kobe would have given him a ringing endorsement, which would have been deserved. And if he was still alive, to see Pau Gasol, see his jersey get retired at Staples Center, he would no doubt be there. It'd be a special moment. And big shout out, big congratulations to Pau Gasol. As a Lakers fan, thank you for all of your years of service, along with just your tremendous career in the NBA. He was a fantastic player who we have to keep remembering and keep appreciating the career and what he did. Okay. All right. So, final couple topics of the day. So, the MLB playoffs are underway. Last night, Yankees and the Red Sox in the American League wild card game. The Red Sox dominated the Yankees 6-2. They have now advanced to the ALDS to face the Tampa Bay Rays. And it's interesting because baseball is one of the few sports where we really don't care too much about the regular season. There are 162 games. And oftentimes, the only time you really start caring and truly closely observing these baseball games is in the postseason, where the magnitude of the moment is elevated. There's a heightened level of emphasis on every single pitch, higher levels of scrutiny, of course. And there's a maxim in baseball that has stood the test of time. And this is something I talked about on Monday, which is that pitching wins in the postseason. Pitching is what wins in the postseason. And what we saw right away in this matchup between the Yankees and the Red Sox last night is the pitching duel was dominated by the Red Sox. Nathan Eovaldi, he's able to last into the 6th inning, only gives up 1 run, 8 strikeouts, 0 walks. For the Red Sox, 0 walks altogether. Their counterpart, Garrett Cole, pulled after 2 innings, gives up 3 earned runs, 2 home runs, 4 hits. Doesn't even make it into the 3rd inning. and they give up 7 walks on the night. So right there, in a nutshell, is almost all you need to know. That pitching in baseball in the postseason is so critical to a team's success. And you combine that with who the Yankees have been the last 4 postseasons. This is a team that has had persistent, perennial postseason struggles, but they've all been the same, which is their inability to hit, their inability to generate offense in the postseason. Now, I know DJ LeMahieu wasn't playing due to injury yesterday. That was a major blow to their lineup. But with the exception of Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, and one swing from Anthony Rizzo, this team once again could not hit the baseball. Giancarlo Stanton probably had the best game I think I've ever seen him play in his perhaps his postseason career. He was 3 for 4, a home run, 2 balls that in any other ballpark likely would be home runs, but because of the big green machine out in Fenway, didn't clear the wall, the green monster. But you look back at Giancarlo Stanton, he has hit 7 home runs in his last 8 postseason games, but this might have been the best postseason game he's ever played because he's only been to the playoffs 3 times, all with the Yankees. And Anthony Rizzo hit 1 home run, which was great. Aaron Judge got on base. I'll touch on some of his production in a little bit, but you just go down the list. Gardner, 0 for 3. Torres, 0 for 3. Gallo, 0 for 3. Urshela had 1 hit. Velasquez, nothing. This team, Gary Sanchez tried to pinch it, wasn't able to produce, but that was a difficult spot for him. Consistently, the biggest struggle for the Yankees, they just cannot get their offense going in the postseason. It's happened for the last 4 years. And again, when you have a limited offense, every mistake is amplified and is magnified. And the time for the Yankees to have clawed their way back was in the top of the 6th inning. Anthony Rizzo had a solo shot to make it a 3-1 game with 1 out. Aaron Judge is able to get on base on an infield single, able to beat out the throw. And then this was the play of the game to me. Giancarlo Stanton with 1 out, Judge over at first, the top of the 6th inning. It's 3-1. He gets a pitch. He rips it. And again, in any other ballpark, that's probably a home run. But because of the green wall there, it hits the wall and drops back onto the field. And it's a single. It's considered a single for Giancarlo Stanton. And then Aaron Judge tries to go from first all the way home. He rounds third, hit the third base. The base coach told him to keep running. It wasn't the wisest decision. He was thrown out at home plate. And now instead of it being 3-1, but you've got 1 out and 2 guys on the corners with a perfect position to bring Aaron Judge home to make it 3-2 since you couldn't get a home run. Now it's still 3-1, but they're 2 outs and Stanton's over at first base, and all the momentum has been swallowed up by the Red Sox, and the fans are back into it. And that was the play of the game to me. And I think the problem is, I've talked about the offense. I've highlighted how much the offense has sputtered. Look at how much their offense has sputtered over the last 4 years in those closeout games. So obviously this year, against the Red Sox in the AL wild card game, they lose 6-2. They scored 2 runs, barely, on 2 solo shots. You look last year against the Tampa Bay Rays in 2020, they lost Game 5 in the ALDS. 2-1 in the 5th game, only 1 run. 2018 against the Red Sox, or not 2018, rather 2017 against the Houston Astros in Game 6 and 7 at Minute Maid Park. Now, again, that was the same year that the Astros scandalously won the World Series, but that doesn't impact the Yankees' inability to hit. Rather, that's more impacting the Astros' ability to hit. Yankees lost Game 6, 7-1, and they lost Game 4 or they lost game 6, 7-1. They lost game 7, 4-0 to the Astros. So their offense couldn't generate anything. And so, to be honest, I'm not really sure what you do if you're the Yankees, because they've got the second highest payroll in the MLB, just behind the Dodgers, who have the highest payroll. The difference is the Dodgers were able to justify it by winning a World Series last year, and they've reached the World Series 3 out of the last 4 years. What have the Yankees had to show for the second highest payroll in MLB? Again, this year, they lose in the AL wild card to the Boston Red Sox. Mixing up all these sports. 2020, lost in the ALDS to the Tampa Bay Rays. 2018, lost to the Red Sox, got swept by the Red Sox in the ALDS. 2017, lost to the Astros in the ALCS. 2019, they lost to the Astros also in the ALCS. So they haven't been able to even reach the World Series over the last 4 years. And I'm not really sure what the problem is. I mean, I don't think that Aaron Boone is the problem, personally. I know that he's going to have to take the fall. I'm not sure if he's going to want to return, but he's a hometown legend. In fact, even against the Red Sox, as I alluded to on Monday, he hit that huge walk-off home run in the 11th inning of Game 7 against the Red Sox in 2003 to propel them to the World Series that year. Aaron Boone is a Yankees legend in his own right. And he's got the credibility. He's got the cachet. Players respect him. I think this is one of those instances where if you're the player and if you're the New York Yankees, the collective unit just isn't producing right now. And that's the bigger issue to me, more so than what's the coaching. I understand a great coach can elicit better performances. I really don't think this is an Aaron Boone issue. I think the players just, for whatever reason, have come up extremely small in the postseason. I'm not going to blame Garrett Cole every single time the Yankees come up short. Yesterday was not his best moment. He's getting paid this huge 9-year, $324 million deal to pitch well in games like this. He's had great postseason games, so this is not a complete indictment on him as a pitcher, but this obviously was a major, major failure on his end. So I'm not really sure what you do if you're the Yankees. Now, the interesting thing is the two guys that kind of provided huge sparks for both clubs were the former Chicago Cub players that won the World Series in 2016. Kyle Schwarber hit a solo home run for the Red Sox to make it 3-0. Obviously, Anthony Rizzo hit the first home run of the game for the Yankees to put them on the board. They provided a nice spark. But listen, credit to the Red Sox, because since Alex Cora has come back, I've always had my concerns and my questions about Alex Cora, given some of the kind of nefarious things that I thought he was involved with the Astros and stealing some of their tactics against the Dodgers. But there's no question they feel a lot better when they've got Alex Cora. They play a lot more confidently with him as the manager. And all of a sudden, this is a team that missed the expanded playoffs last year to not only making the playoffs this year, but advancing to the ALDS. So major accomplishment for them. Okay. Final topic before my Malkin's moments. Quickly, Dodgers and the St. Louis Cardinals are playing tonight. First of all, I hate that Max Muncy cannot play tonight due to a dislocated elbow. That's not good news. I don't like that Clayton Kershaw has been ruled out for the entire postseason by Dave Roberts. And then I also just don't really like, as a Dodgers fan, that we have to face the St. Louis Cardinals, because historically, this has not been the best rivalry and the best matchup for the Dodgers. In fact, they've played 5 times since 1985. Cardinals have taken 4 of 5. The only time that the Dodgers have beaten them in the last 5 postseason meetings was in 2009. In the NLDS, they swept them 3-0. With the exception of that, 2013, 2014, you had Clayton Kershaw and Zach Greinke at the height of their careers. You had Hanley Ramirez and Andre Ethier and Matt Kemp. And they lost to a Adam Wainwright led team, who once again is getting the starting pitching job tonight against Max Scherzer. You had Adam Wainwright pitching back then, and then you had just this deep bazillion number of Matts on that team. You had Matt Carpenter, you had Matt Holliday, Matt Adams hit a 3-run homer that iced the 2014 series. And I believe that 2013, Dodgers started out on the road. 2014, they actually had home court advantage, yet still lost at home. So this matchup is actually pretty even, because historically in the regular season, the Dodgers have beaten the St. Louis Cardinals 1,036 times. The Cardinals have beaten the Dodgers in the regular season 1,033 times. And this year, the Dodgers barely won the season series 4-3 against the St. Louis Cardinals, who perhaps entering this postseason were one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in baseball. They just came off a stretch winning 17 straight games. And so I'm concerned. Listen, I love Max Scherzer. I think he'll pitch extremely well. He's getting the starting nod. Adam Wainwright is getting the starting nod for the St. Louis Cardinals. He had the second most wins as a pitcher in MLB. Fortunately, the Dodgers had 3 of the top 5 pitchers for most wins in the MLB on their team. Julio Urias finished first with 20. Then you had Buehler and you had Scherzer. The Dodgers have the best ERA in baseball, had the most saves in baseball. They're top 5 in home runs. But all of that being said, the wild card game, it doesn't matter what the stats say, what the numbers say. It comes down to one game. It's not about who's better. One game, can you strike? Can you capture lightning in a bottle in one game to propel you forward? And it's utter bogus. I mean, it's the fact that the Dodgers won 106 games and somehow are in the wild card game with the second best record in baseball by one game. They're in the wild card is a bit preposterous to me. Baseball's got to change that at some point, but it is what it is. That's the situation. And there's a lot of star power. This is why the Dodgers have the team that they have, because they're built to hopefully withstand Max Muncy not being there, even though there's a big void at first base. You've got Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, Justin Turner, Trey Turner, who has the most hits in baseball. In fact, he's got the highest batting average in baseball right now. Corey Seager, Chris Taylor. This team should be fine. But then again, the Cardinals, they've got some experienced players. Paul Goldschmidt, Yadier Molina, Nolan Arenado, who they got from the Colorado Rockies. Matt Carpenter is still there. I just kind of despise that guy, Matt Carpenter, more out of respect, not actually the person, just the player. He's still on the team. So they've got a lot of guys. Paul DeJong is still there as well. The Cardinals have some players. This is going to be a tight game tonight. I'm concerned. I think the Dodgers will pull it out. They should, because I think their pitching is better. Once they get Wainwright out of the game, I think that the Dodgers can pull away with their depth. But we'll see. It's going to be close. Okay, final topic. Malkin's moments. Just a couple Malkin's moments. Very short today. Big shout out. My first Malkin's moment goes to Bubba Wallace, the NASCAR driver who captured in the rain-shortened NASCAR race at Talladega his first career Cup Series level win. It was his first win in 143 starts. In fact, he became the first black driver to earn a Cup Series victory since 1963, when Wendell Scott won a Cup Series level, and he became just the second black driver to win a race at the Cup Series level. So he's been breaking barriers. He's been shattering records. He was signed by Michael Jordan's kind of X23 racing company. So big shout out to Bubba Wallace. He's on the ascend. He's only 27, And I'm happy for him and his team that he was able to win. And then finally, again, first win in 143 starts. Very, very impressive. And finally, BYU, their running back, Tyler Algier, hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, 22 carries for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns in the 34-20 win over Utah State over the weekend. And listen, we don't talk about the non-Power 5 schools too much, but the only team that's really gotten a lot of attention right now is Cincinnati, but don't sleep on BYU. BYU is ranked 10th right now in the college football top 25. Again, the only other team that's a non-Power 5 team that's ranked higher than them is Cincinnati at number 5. BYU is right there at number 10. They are a really good football team, and this might be the best chance for a non-Power 5 team to reach the college football playoff. And as long as Cincinnati and BYU continue to move through the ranks, you got Coastal Carolina behind them at 16. This might be the year. This might be the year. So big shout out to him for an incredible performance and their entire program. That'll do it for us. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific, Mondays and Wednesday mornings. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe, at Jonah Malkin. On Instagram, jmalk97. On TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.